With the NBA trade deadline just over a week away, I thought it'd be interesting to look back at the top trade of the deadline from the last 10 years and see how it worked out. If you guys like the content, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. Let's go for 42 likes on today's video, and let's get into this. Today's video is sponsored by PrizePicks. Most of y'all know PrizePicks by now. It's a super simple player prop site that's legal in most US states. They just give you lines for certain players. You pick over or under. It's been a struggle for us lately, but today we are getting back on track. I feel it. Taking a look at all the lines, the first thing that really jumped out to me was Jaren Jackson Jr.'s points. He only needs 16.5. Give me the over. Then I took Giddey over on rebounds, which seemed like a no-brainer with it only at 7.5. I threw in Jalen Green over points, rebounds, and assists, as the line just seemed a little bit low. And lastly, you already know I had to have a three-pointers made, and I decided to go with Miles Bridges, who only needs 2. So there it is. The over, that if it hits, my $10 entry will become $100. If any of that sounds interesting to you guys, you can actually get a deposit match up to $100 when you click the link or use code JIMMER when you sign up. Thank you, PrizePicks, for sponsoring today's video. We're going to kick things off by going back to 2012. Now, what I really found interesting doing this video is that the NBA trade deadline has definitely become a bigger deal over the last few seasons. As you're going to see, in the first few years of this video, the trades were very underwhelming by today's standards. For 2012, you've got a couple options, but I would say the biggest trade at the time was probably the Warriors sending Monte Ellis, Ekpe Udoh, and Kwame Brown to the Bucks in exchange for Andrew Bogut and Steven Jackson. At the time, with the emergence of Curry and Golden State, as well as a very impressive sophomore campaign from their lottery pick of a year ago, Klay Thompson, it made sense to move Ellis in favor of a big that could help round out this roster. Now, this trade doesn't really affect today, but it definitely had a major effect on the years to follow. At the time of the trade, Ellis was averaging over 20 points a game. He would only last one season with the Bucks before going to the Mavericks. He had a couple solid seasons there, but then we saw his career really go down quickly, and the last time we saw him was in 2017. Andrew Bogut would play 4 seasons with the Warriors, playing a huge role in their success during that mid-2010s run, including bringing home defensive second-team honors in 2015, along with an NBA championship. Following their defeat to the Cavaliers in the 2016 finals, he'd get traded to the Mavericks to free up cap space so that they could sign Kevin Durant. After that, he bounced around the league with small roles. The last time we saw him was in 2019. For 2013, there really isn't a trade worth talking about. It has to be one of the least interesting trade deadlines we've ever seen. For example, some of the top trades include Thomas Robinson going to the Rockets and Marcus Morris going to the Suns. For obvious reasons, I think we should just move on. Now, 2014 wasn't so great itself. Another year where there was far from a blockbuster trade. Probably the biggest at the time was the 76ers trading Evan Turner and Lavoy Allen for Danny Granger. Now, for this to be the biggest trade, considering where these players were in their career, you get a pretty good idea of just how disappointing it was. Danny Granger, despite being an emerging star just a few years prior, had been dealing with a lot of injuries and negotiated a buyout with the 76ers before even playing a game with them. Evan Turner was in the middle of his best season since being a top selection, averaging 17 points, but this would actually be the only season Turner played with the Pacers, and he would end up becoming a mid-level role player at best. For 2015, there was a few pretty big trades, and they all actually involved the Suns in some way or another. You had Michael Carter-Williams go to the Bucks, Isaiah Thomas go from the Kings to Sacramento, but probably the biggest trade at the time was the Suns sending their disgruntled point guard Goran Dragic to the Miami Heat in return for Danny Granger, John Solomons, and 2 first-round selections. Since then, up until this current season, he had a lot of success with the Heat, averaging 16-5, shooting 46% from the field and 36% from 3. He was a key factor in the Heat, making a run all the way to the NBA Finals in 2020. But sadly, he dealt with injuries in the later stages of the playoffs, which really hurt their chances. Maybe with him, it could have been a little bit different. I would say the 2016 deadline was the last recent one that wasn't all too exciting until it really picks up. The biggest trade was probably the Orlando Magic sending their young, emerging forward, who was averaging an efficient 17 points a game, Tobias Harris, to the Pistons in exchange for Brandon Jennings and Ersan Ilyasova. He would spend 2 seasons there, putting up pretty similar numbers before getting traded at the 2018 deadline, which we'll get to in a little bit. 2017 was a fun one. We saw one of the biggest blockbuster trades we've ever seen go down at a deadline, and for the most part, it kind of came out of nowhere, which made it even crazier. The Sacramento Kings traded their superstar center DeMarcus Cousins to the Pelicans in exchange for Buddy Hield, Tyreek Evans, Langston Galloway, a first and a second round selection. What made this trade so interesting is who Cousins was teaming up with. Since being drafted in 2012, the Pelicans failed to put much competent talent around their superstar Anthony Davis. For them to go from that to probably forming the best front court since Tim Duncan and David Robinson had practically every NBA fan excited to see what they could do. While his presence didn't turn them into a contender overnight, it was definitely a special duo to watch. He closed out the season averaging 24, 12, and 4 on really impressive efficiency. The next season, he was playing possibly the best basketball of his life, averaging 25, 13, and 5, shooting 47% from the field and 35% from 3. But sadly, at the end of January, Cousins would suffer the worst injury out there for a basketball player, a torn Achilles, which required season-ending surgery. This put him in a tough spot that offseason, as he would become a free agent. Without the injury, there was no question. He was in for a max deal, but that wasn't the case with it. And while there were some pretty big deals on the table, including the Pelicans, who offered him a 2-year, $40 million deal, upset at his market value, he decided to get back at the league and join the super team Golden State Warriors, fresh off an NBA title, for their mid-level exception. Since then, DeMarcus Cousins hasn't come close to returning to that superstar level player. His time with the Warriors was injury-riddled. He signed with the Lakers the following season, but ahead of the year, tore his ACL. Since then, he's bounced around the league and is currently with the Denver Nuggets on just a 10-day deal. Crazy to see how much has changed in such a short time since that trade deadline move. The 2018 deadline was exciting at the time, probably headlined by the struggling LeBron James-led Cavs, basically flipping their roster on its head, bringing in guys like Jordan Clarkson, Larry Nance, and Rodney Hood. While they were the talk of the deadline, I don't think they pulled off the biggest single trade. I think that was the Clippers sending Blake Griffin to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for a package headlined by Tobias Harris and a few future picks. This was crazy to see at the time, considering he just signed a max extension, and it really set in that the Lob City Clippers a lot of us had come to love was finally over. Now at this time, Griffin was far from the kid that jumped over a car to win the dunk contest, but once getting to Detroit, we would really start to see him evolve his game. The following year, he would average 25, 8, and 5, shooting 46% from the field and 36% from 3. The next season though, we would see Griffin deal with various injuries, and he really hasn't been the same since. Practically overnight, he became one of the worst contracts in the league. In the middle of last season, he would reach a buyout agreement with the Pistons and signed with the contending Nets. There, things really started to come together. Buying into his role, he truly looked super impressive in their playoff effort, but now this season, still with the Nets, it's sadly been a struggle once again. He's averaging less than 7 points, shooting less than 39% from the field. I really hope he can have an end to the season like we saw last year. For 2019, we've got a player that we've already mentioned previously, and that's Tobias Harris, who ended up going from the Clippers to the 76ers, along with Boban and Mike Scott, in exchange for Wilson Chandler, Mike Muscala, Landry Shamet, 2 future first and 2 future second round selections. After landing the #1 pick in 2017, where they took Markelle Fultz, it looked like that was going to be their core of the future, but as we know, Fultz would end up becoming one of the most disappointing top picks we've ever seen. At this same deadline, they would decide to move on, sending him to the Magic for a bag of chips. At this time, I truly thought Tobias was the best fit imaginable, giving this team more spacing and elite upside, considering at the time he was just 26 years old, averaging 21 on practically 50, 40, 90. He would end up being huge for them that season, as they were just one Kawhi Leonard shot away from taking down the eventual NBA champion Raptors. Now, the 76ers would have a huge following offseason. Jimmy Butler would end up leaving for Miami, and the 76ers extended Harris on a massive 5-year, $180 million deal. A contract that's become one of the worst in the league, but that doesn't mean that Tobias doesn't bring a solid amount of value to the court. You just have really high expectations when you still have 2 years left on your deal, getting $40 million a season. He's currently the second leading scorer on a 76ers team, pushing for the #1 seed in the East. It's on absolute fire right now. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens to him in the near future with all the rumors the front office is looking to package him in a Ben Simmons trade at the deadline. I think 2020 had the most interesting move to look back on. While there were rumblings since the offseason that the Warriors were going to trade D'Angelo Russell, it was still a pretty big shocker when he was sent to the Timberwolves in exchange for Andrew Wiggins and a 2021 first-round selection. At the time, it seemed like a pretty good deal. The Timberwolves were getting what appeared to be a young upgrade that was personal friends with their star Karl Anthony Towns. The Warriors took on the contract of Andrew Wiggins, which could be used in a future trade, and maybe they could turn his game around to a degree, as well as getting that draft pick, which projected to have a lot of value. What's ended up happening since, I don't think anyone could have expected. Andrew Wiggins has become a whole new player since getting to Golden State. It's funny how we get all excited about these talented players that are on struggling, terrible organizations going to established rosters like the Warriors, just assuming they could somehow drastically change that player. 99% of the time, that's not the case, but with Andrew Wiggins, it seemed to have worked. Knowing he wasn't going to have the same freedom he did in Minnesota has really helped Wiggins. He's bought in on the defensive side, truly becoming borderline elite on that end, while also posting the best efficiency of his career. This season, he's been a huge part of the Warriors' success. He's averaging 18 points, shooting 49% from the field and 42% from 3. With the Warriors contending for the #1 seed in the West, while it's controversial, he's actually ended up becoming an all-star starter this season. Just crazy looking back. That first round selection has become Jonathan Kuminga, easily one of the most promising rookies of the year. I don't think there's any question his defense is going to carry him to a great career, but we're starting to see the offense come together as of late. In the last 12 games, he's averaging 11 on really solid efficiency. For the Timberwolves, D'Angelo Russell has remained a solid point guard, averaging 19 and 7, but not on the greatest efficiency. Now, he is a huge part of the Timberwolves contending for a playoff spot this season, but I think it's safe to say on paper, the Warriors have won this trade, but I don't fault the Timberwolves. I don't think Wiggins would have had that same development if he stayed with them. Lastly, we've got 2021, and the biggest trade was definitely the Bulls trading away Wendell Carter, Otto Porter, and 2 future firsts in exchange for All-Star center Nikola Vucevic. What's so interesting about this is that the Bulls are currently the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and if you told me that a year ago, I'd probably be attributing a lot of that to the addition of Vucevic, but that really hasn't been the case. He's had his ups and downs this season, and while he's still been solid, averaging 17 and 11 on pretty disappointing efficiency, it's really been their free agency class that's put them in such a great position this season. The other end of this trade is fascinating. Wendell Carter has shown a lot of improvement, but the really interesting part is who they got with one of those first round selections. Via the Bulls, with the 8th overall pick in the recent draft, the Magic got Franz Wagner, who's easily been one of the better rookies this season. In the last 30 games, he's averaging 18, 5, and 3, shooting 49% from the field and 35% from 3. His success is going to make this trade very interesting to look back at for a very long time. But that's the video, guys. You guys send me your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked the video, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.